Thanks, band. Nice, great music, awesome music. And of course, what y'all don't know is, of course, some of you came expecting you would, and some of you online thinking you might hear Hannah Kirby today, and some of you Elizabeth Wills, and that wasn't a bait and switch kind of thing. They both had to call in today sick. And so Brad was scrambling, our camera person, Parker, he couldn't be here. So so we were scrambling, and isn't it always fun when you have to scramble? I mean, I got these notices from Brad and from Elizabeth and from about Hannah and from Parker at about 7:30 this morning, right? Getting ready, coming down here. And so I look at Linda, and she says, she looks at me, she smiles, she goes, "All right, disruption, isn't it awesome?" It's like, yeah, that's really kind of what it's about. I hadn't even thought about that. It's like, wait and see what might happen. Yeah, maybe nobody will be there. Maybe they'll all walk out when you say, "Sorry, Hannah's not here today." So Advent is, we think of Advent as that time, right, when we sort of sit and we sort of wait and we contemplate and we're waiting for something to happen. I don't know if you've been noticing the screens we're playing every Sunday morning, the same things every Sunday morning early on. Wait for it, and then there's some quotes. So if you haven't been noticing it, check it out next week. A couple of other things, too, that you might not have noticed. The first thing is you might not have noticed that there's not a whole lot of Christmas decorations up here. So part of that reason is because, next week they're going to decorate downstairs, I understand, but they don't decorate this because it's a wedding venue, right? So the reception's decorated the way it needs to be, and then it's taken away. And as my uncle would say, it's left in as good or better condition than when they got here. So here's my invitation to you. Bring something next week, and then take it home. Bring something from home and take it. Nobody will know the difference. Just come in a little bit early, set it up here on the stage, put it on the altar, set it around on the table, bring some poinsettias, bring a wreath and hang it from the door, take it back home. I dare you. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. So here's the text I want to read to you this morning. Comes from the chapter of Luke, very familiar text, one of my favorite actually. And let me pull it up here on my phone. Comes from Luke chapter 1, verse 42. Mary has already received the announcement from the angel that she's going to bear a child. That was actually the text for this morning for the whole church. I'm going to read something else because it just occurred to me I had not really understood what this was about. I love being a part of 1111 and being a part of the leadership here because, I've had to reframe my reality over the years. I've had to rethink how I do theology over the years, partly because of where I've been for the 25 years when I was traveling around as a storyteller and a musician and kids entertainer, and partly because things change. And I was changing, and I'd been involved with 1111 for years and years with the band, and take this over, and it's been a fascinating journey, and I hope that you've understood that it's been a mutual journey. I'm journeying with you in this whole process. So these are where I'm thinking these days. So here's the scripture text. You can remember this one. She's meeting Elizabeth now, her cousin. And when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, the babe leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit, and she exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why is this granted me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? For behold, when the voice of your greeting came to my ears, the babe in my womb leapt for joy. And blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of that which was spoken to her from the Lord." And Mary said this, "My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices to God, for he has regarded the low estate of his handmaiden. For behold, henceforth all generations will call me blessed. For he who is mighty has done a great thing for me. Holy is his name. And mercy is on those who fear from generation to generation. He's shown strength with his arms. He's scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He's put down the mighty from their thrones and exalted those of low degrees. He's filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he sent away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in the remembrance of his mercy." Two things real quick, right off the start. What does that mean? My soul magnifies the Lord. Think about that. Because I've been trying to work with you for years and getting into my own head this idea of what is non-duality? What does that mean to think in non-dual terms? Not to think of dualism as we're here and God's out there, but to think of God as the very ground of our being, as the theologian Paul Tillich had said. How does that even make sense then with this idea of my soul magnifies the Lord? What would that mean? Especially in this time of Advent. The second thing I want to suggest to you is that Mary and Elizabeth had what would be called a God moment. Have you had one of those before? You know, where you're talking to someone and then unexpectedly, all of a sudden, you got an insight you never expected, or you got a sense of compassion from one you never expected, or you suddenly felt something you participated in that just sort of lifted you, elevated you in that moment, and you think, oh, this is really special. This must have been a God moment, right? And what do I always say? Every moment's a God moment. They're all God moments. So this time of Advent, I want to think with you really quickly about a couple of things, because we are going to finish this up fast so we can get to the business, well, not the business, but the real inspiration of our time together today. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is this idea of what it means to magnify the Lord. And I want to think with you about Advent. Now last year, I don't know if you remembered, but last year, Linda and I had some fun. We were doing interviews in Wesley Hall over in the main building, and we were, during Advent, I had a cap. Do you remember what the cap said? It was my MAGA cap. Do you remember the MAGA cap? I'm not talking about that MAGA cap. I'm talking about the one that was purple, that stood for Make Advent Great Again. Because we typically think of Advent as just one of these holy seasons, one of these liturgical seasons that the mainline Protestant churches practice. A lot of other churches like Baptists and Bible churches and other non-denominational, they don't necessarily do that. But the mainline Protestants has been part of the historical liturgy of the Catholic Church and mainline churches like Presbyterian and Methodist. What does that even mean, Advent? So Linda and I set out to make Advent great again. And as I was thinking about that, I wished I'd worn the cap today. But what I wanted you to think about was those words we used last week. Those ideas of waiting, not meaning sitting, but the actual root word for waiting meaning to come alive, to be alive, to watch and wait is to be alive. And Advent is this idea of coming and going, so there's this life to it. There's not this waiting for something to happen. We think about it, and what do we say we're waiting for? Come on. Come on, people, talk back. What are we waiting for? Christmas. Presents. What are we waiting for? I heard it. The birth of the baby Jesus, right? We're waiting for the birth of the baby Jesus. Now, and so we sing songs and we go to Christmas Eve services and we do all of that. And listen, I love singing Silent Night as much as the next person with 1,000 voices and 1,000 candles lit. It's really moving. And I go there because I can't wait to be moved. I'm not listening to anything. I'm just waiting to be moved. But that's not what Advent is. Advent's something else. What does it mean, my soul magnifies the Lord? I've shared this story before, and I'm going to share this story again. Peter has told me it's one of his favorite stories, so my apologies for repeating it, but I think some of you will love hearing it again. So this fella, he's isolated, he's stranded on an island. He's all by himself, been there for years. It's not Tom Hanks, but he's been there for years. And so finally he's found, and when they find him, they notice there's 3 huts on the island. There's 2 kind of close together, and then there's another hut down the beach a little ways. And they ask him, they said, well, what did you buy? Who are these huts belong to? And he says, oh, they're mine. They said, well, what are these 2? Well, that's my home, he said. That's where I go to sleep. I'll eat, I'll read. That's my home. What's this other one? Well, that's my church. That's where I go for my sacred experience, for my sense of transcendence. That's where I go to worship. Well, what's this other one down the beach, they asked. He said, oh, that used to be my church. Those people are horrible. What does it mean for my soul to magnify the Lord? Keep that in the back of your mind here. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? So, my Advent was always around. When we designed Advent for our kids growing up, we always designed this sort of element of surprise, right? That's kind of what you love doing at Christmas time, providing surprises. And the Advent calendar, ours was a box that you open up the little doors every day. And each day we'd have chocolate, or we'd have a little trinket or something fun. And then we started to notice something, which you do too, which we all do as adults. We started to notice that our kids, our 2 boys, were expecting stuff, right? They were expecting something in there. If they had an empty box, they'd really be upset. And then I'd try to be creative, and I'd say, oh, use your imagination. They'd be like, I'd want to imagine something's in there. But they were always getting something, and we noticed that they'd start expecting that something to be in there. And so the next year, we did a new tradition. We practiced something that I've often talked about in here called living as if. And we started throwing in their little fortune cookie kinds of sayings that we created ourselves. Sometimes it would be a clue, like a little hidden sort of direction, follow this clue to something else, and then that to something else. Sometimes it would simply be a fortune that said, today you're going to have a great day. Or it might say, today, your best friend is going to do something for you. And they'd come back and they'd say, well, nothing happened. He didn't do anything for me. And then the next day there would be another one that said the same thing. And they'd say, well, maybe the problem is you have to already know that it's there. You have to already know that they've done something for you. Now try to act like that. And we'd have to kind of practice it. What would that be like if your friend really did something great? I'd feel great. I'd feel really wonderful. Okay, live that way today. See what happens. Then we'd have them come back and tell us about it. Then every now and then, just because that's tedious, we throw a piece of candy in there or something else. But we began to create this idea that Advent isn't so much about waiting for something to come to you as much as participating in making things happen. And I came to realize that what we were doing was we were creating a clandestine serendipity club. Think about that. A clandestine serendipity club. I want to suggest to you, as we start thinking about who we are, that that's who we've been. Maybe we haven't been living into it as much as we would like to, or as we recognize we need to, but that's maybe what we're a part of. So let me rephrase that phrase, my soul magnifies the Lord. What if we think non-dually, right? What if we think non-dually that we live and move and have our being, as the Apostle Paul told those Greeks that those Romans that he was talking to in Athens that time in Acts, that we live and move and have our being. This is the deity, this is the reality, the supernatural, the God. Or as Paul Tillich said, God is the very ground of our being. What if that is it? How does our soul magnify that? What does it mean to magnify that? My soul magnifies the very ground of our connectedness. What? Does it? I mean, that's rhetorical. You don't have to answer that, because if I were to answer that, I'd go like, sometimes, a little bit. What does it mean to say my soul magnifies the very ground of how we are interconnected one with another? How would I do that? What does it mean to be a lens to our interconnectedness with our enemies, with those who would disagree with us, with those uncomfortable places? What does it mean to not be waiting to be the magnifying lens through which that's seen, but to be the clandestine serendipity club, to be a part of that? So years ago, I had this great experience, and it wasn't my idea, but it worked perfectly. I was working at a camp. Brad has done some of these camps with me over the years, and now Brad's doing these oncology camps, pediatric oncology camps, and I had done one out east of Georgia, out near Athens, and it was a camp for kids with hemophilia. Now, here's the thing: kids who have hemophilia have an individualized disease, and they bond together over that, but it's not necessarily life-threatening. When you go to an oncology camp, nobody can do anything wrong, because everybody realizes they're living in the midst of finitude. They're living in the midst of a reality that just shuts things down. How do you live with that reality at your door? You participate in the clandestine serendipity club. Doesn't matter what, you just start doing stuff. You just start living life. You just start sharing life. That's why I have that wonderful app that I want all of you to go home and download called We Croak, so that you're reminded 5 times a day you're going to die. There's no gift better than to remember why we're here, to live fully, to magnify the ground of our interconnectedness. So here I am at this camp now. It's a hemophilia camp, and there's 2 cabins that are fighting with each other. 2 cabins of 3rd grade boys that are at each other's throats. They're playing mean-spirited pranks on each other that's disrupting the whole camp. It's creating all of this tension. The counselors are getting in on it. So I have one of the assistant directors at camp comes up to me and says, I got an idea, and she suggests that we go out for a storytelling thing in the middle of the night out on the lake, and that I tell the story of the lake monster. The legend of the lake monster. I said, I don't know the story of the lake. She said, make it up. So we got the boys on a big pontoon boat from both camps and the counselors, and we were sitting on the boat, and it's in the middle of the night, and it's getting late, it's dark, it's probably 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Number one, we've already broken curfew, so now they know they're in on breaking the law together. There's still a little bit tense and animosity there, but they've managed not to fuss with each other. And they're focused on me telling this story. And right on cue, as I'm telling this story, and I've really got them lathered up with this sense of anxiety and dread because of the other stories I've told, that now I've got them hooked. And I'm sitting on the edge of the pontoon, and right at the moment when I start to talk about what this creature used to do in this lake, something comes out of the water, grabs me by the back, and draws me down into the water, drags me into the water with a splash. And it is silent. I snuck up underneath the pontoon between the two pontoons, and I'm sitting there quietly, and I hear someone say, "What just happened?" And then I hear a counselor say, "Do you think somebody needs to go in and look for him in there?" And then another kid from the other side said, "It's too late for Tom. We need to save ourselves." And so they take the boat and they go back to the shore. And I'm waiting for them on the shore. And they're stunned for a second, like maybe I've just resurrected. And then they realize the whole joke that's been pulled over their eyes. And then they realize that they've kind of been in on this. But for the rest of that night, those two cabins can't stop talking about how much fun and how each other was reacting to it. And they were laughing at each other. They said, "You said to leave Tom in the water and leave him there, you know." And then the others were like, "You really believe what was?" It just was a fun evening. And for the rest of that week, those two cabins became best of buddies. What does it mean to be a part of the clandestine serendipity club? How can you do that? How many ways can you participate in creating God moments? What if that's really what Advent is all about? What if our being here isn't so much about having the club that we belong to because we say the right things, as much as secretively being a part of reality that does the right things? I wonder if that's what Jesus was really wanting all along. Somehow that we begin to reveal, to magnify the interconnectedness of all of us, grounded in love.